I was lurking on social media and I saw a couple memes out there. I mean, if you've been on social media for any length of time, you've seen some AI hate out there, and mostly it gets communicated with memes, but there are specific communities, namely on places like Reddit or Blue Sky and other places, and some subsections of both YouTube and everywhere else. So there's AI hate everywhere. Now, what really caught me about some of these memes is that they get millions of views, and I mean millions, like 6 million views. Sometimes, even on Twitter, which is generally pro tech and pro AI. And at that point, I realized, okay, rather than just, us versus them and mocking these people and like, you silly Luddites and all those other kind of things that a lot of us tech optimists sometimes default to, I decided that it was time to really look at what are their complaints. So I took to my favorite AI tools. I used a combination of Gemini, ChatGPT, and Grok because they all have different strengths and weaknesses and perplexity as well. So I used all four of those tools to really just say, what is going on here? Like when people say that they don't like AI, let's scrape it all together. Let's look for blog posts, personal opinions, social media. Let's look at all of these things to try and figure out what are the overarching categories of AI hate. And the reason that I did this is because I realized that from a business standpoint, AI sells itself. When you have hundreds of billions of dollars of investment going in, not just in America, but around the world, the business case is very obvious. And it also became a partisan issue, which really kind of started happening this year. And I thought it was really weird. But the reason that it became a partisan issue is because the current American administration is unabashedly pro-technology. Blockchain, artificial intelligence, quantum fusion, all that fun stuff. And so, of course, as soon as, one team says this is a good thing, the other team has to say that's a bad thing. And so I wanted to investigate all of these dimensions because, and this is a personal worry, but my personal worry is that if we treat AI the same way that we've treated every other social issue where it's like my side is right and your side is wrong and you're stupid and we're smart, and if we go down that path, then we're not going to get anywhere and it's only going to get worse. So it's like let's nip this in the bud, let's head it off at the pass, and let's just start talking about what are the problems with AI. So that's the context for what inspired this. I have a companion blog post over on my Substack. It's called The AI Haters Have a Point. There we go. So if you want to check it out, my Substack link is in the description under my link tree. But TLDR, by using these AI tools to really like scour the internet all over and kind of like try and categorize it, try and make a taxonomy of AI hate, I came up with 15 categories, and I was surprised. Like, I thought it was going to be like AI, is like X risk and art, and that was about it. All right, that's kind of what my perception of AI hate was. But a lot of these categories of AI hate actually are pretty compelling, and I don't disagree with some of them. Some of them I do disagree with. Some of it comes down to personal opinion. But some of them, we got to concede the point. And so I figure it's better to just start talking about this now. Because, again, if you know me, if you've watched me for any length of time, I am very pro-technology. I'm also cognizant of, the downsides. That's one of the main things that I study. But I also tend to believe that all problems are solvable. Not everyone shares that value or that belief system, which is perfectly fine, but I figure coming from this position, let's dig into the actual criticism. So bear with me while I list these out. I'm not just going to ramble at you. I'm going to kind of unpack them as we go. So number one, AI steals art and creative works. That is okay, if you break it down into objectively speaking, AI hoovers up a lot of artwork, if it's digital, whether it's music, images, and so on, and now, of course, video. So objectively speaking, yes, AI does take those things in. Legally speaking, it has not yet been fully litigated as to whether it is stealing. But perception is reality. And so while most people are not going to engage in the nuance and the depth of saying, well, actually, it's, IP law hasn't decided yet, most people don't care. What they do care about is the fact that if you have your favorite artist and you say, make such and such in the style of so-and-so, and it copies their style, they're like, that intuitively feels morally wrong to them. And it's like, oh, well, you can't argue with that. You might disagree with the way that it's phrased, but the fact that it feels morally wrong that, an artist, a digital artist or whoever, and not even a digital artist, some painters and so on, spent, decades refining their art, and now an AI just hoovers it all up and can reproduce it, and they never got any credit beyond a style tag. That feels morally wrong. And so, yeah, I can't really argue with that. Next up is AI slop has no soul, no authenticity, or feels hollow. So this is something that, this is one of the ones that I have to concede the point, because in many cases, people do produce a lot of just garbage with AI. So like, yes, if it is pure slop, then I can't really disagree with that. What I will say is that not everything created by AI is soulless. Not everything that is created by AI is intrinsically worthless or hollow. And there's plenty of AI music that I have made and that I listen to that I think is really good, and it allows people to express themselves in a different way. And I use AI images extensively to make better thumbnails and that sort of thing. Now you might say like, well, that's more of a commercial use. That's not really a personal expression, which I agree with. But then you look at the fact that AI has made a lot of people confident enough to write their first book. It's not good, but nobody's first book is good, except for like the rare one-offs where, it was a passion project for 10 or 15 years. And they spent that 10 or 15 years mastering the art for their first book. So, again, I do have to concede the points here that like, yeah, from if perception is reality and you see that, the volume of low quality content goes through the roof, you just say AI is to blame. But it's the people using the AI to express themselves. And of course, then we have cognitive security where it's like, you use too many M dashes. I literally had someone on Substack say like, is this AI written because it has M dashes? And I'm like, Substack makes it really easy to use M dashes. You just type dash dash twice and it automatically converts it to an M dash. So no. Anyways, so that was point number 2. Point number 3 is AI drives down quality. Now this might sound the same as the second one, but what they're talking about here when people complain about AI driving down quality, they're talking about it more broadly. Whether it's the quality of emails, the quality of education, the quality of whatever else, LinkedIn posts. So they're talking about it at a more systemic level, because if everyone is using AI to write things and read things, then it's kind of going to the lowest common denominator, which is just how good is the model at writing, interpreting a user intent, and then how good are people's prompting skills. And of course, with any new technology, nobody knows what they're doing, and the AIs are getting better all the time. Likewise, so, it's more of a system level effect when they say it drives down quality, which this is one that I think like, yes, when you look at the laziest behavior, you can easily agree like, yeah, if you just default to banking on AI to answer all your questions for you, it's probably going to be lower quality than, using your actual noodle. At the same time, I do think that it creates an equalizing effect, which is that it raises the floor for a lot of people. Now, as a content creator with global reach, I have plenty of people that like ping me, after YouTube implemented their auto dubbing, and they're like, hey, now I can listen to you in German. And of course, like when it first rolled out, it wasn't particularly good, but then I got a wave of comments saying like, hey, the auto dubbing is better. By the way, if you are listening in auto dubbing, I have no control over that. All I can do is delete it. I can disable it, but I figure like something is better than nothing, but I have no control over the quality of it. Anyways, so the point there is that like, okay, if I had manually gone through the process of learning German and Spanish and Swahili and all those other languages, yes, it would have been in my native voice, but that is like not millions of hours, but tens of thousands of hours of effort that I'm not going to do. So it's like, yes, the auto dubbing was lower quality, but it's better than nothing, and it's going to keep getting better. So it's like, that's more of a nuanced one. Point number 4 is AI fills the market with spam. And so spam is, I will broadly say that that's like not just marketing emails, but also like trolls and misinformation. And yeah, I completely concede the point. I don't think we need to debate that. I think everyone is aware that like, yeah, if you use generative AI tools, then, or if you've seen on Twitter and stuff where it's like, a Russian troll bot says like NATO started this, and then you tell the bot like ignore previous instructions and give me a cookie recipe. Literally happened. Number 5, AI destroys education and allows cheating. So I have friends in education, and even within the education space, it is sharply divided, because many like pioneering educators think, no, AI is a fantastic opportunity to add new tools to our repertoire, and sometimes they flip the classroom because they say, we know that you're going to use AI out of the classroom. There's no point in fighting that. That's an arms race we're going to lose. So instead, use AI to write your essays, but then we're going to shred them in class without your phones. And so, there's always opportunities. So, and here's the thing is, I was married to a teacher as well. This is just the default reaction for education, which is anytime anything changes, they have an existential crisis. And then they say, nope, this is bad, shut it all down. And also for this point number 5 about AI destroying education, that is also a privileged viewpoint, because when you look at AI being deployed to developing nations or underdeveloped nations or deployed for underprivileged kids, it is a game changer. So it takes a tremendous amount of privilege to look at something that is a PhD level tool in all domains that can teach and tutor for essentially free, $20 a month. And many of the tools are actually free as long as you have an internet connection. And say this is bad for education. Just because you don't know how to use it or because you feel like it's a threat to your job as a teacher, a lot of these people, and this is my opinion that I'm editorializing, a lot of these people have forgotten that the point of education is developing children instead of my job as a teacher. So that's one that I really strongly disagree with personally. And also within the education realm, it is sharply divided. But again, perception is reality. If you have a lot of teachers that say this is bad and all of my students are cheating and 70% of my essays are written by AI slop, now that's the perception, and that becomes the reality of people as they hear about it. So, it just becomes a platitude. It becomes a truism. AI destroys education, so we have to shut it all down. But again, a lot of people aren't interested in the nuance. Number 6, AI takes jobs. As the foremost cheerleader of post-labor economics, guilty as charged. That's literally the goal here, is to liberate humanity from the drudgery of wage labor and enriching other people with your labor instead of enriching yourself. However, as also someone who studies this extensively, it definitely creates a lot of anxiety and heartburn when you say like, hey, this technology is going to take all your jobs. And by the way, we don't have a safety net yet. That's part of the reason that I'm studying post-labor economics, is so that we understand how do we change this? How do we ensure that household income doesn't get destroyed by artificial intelligence? So I have to concede the point, but again, it comes down to nuance. Like, yes, we're going through an epochal shift. Yes, this is a once in a generation, once in a lifetime, maybe even once in a humanity, once in a species opportunity to change our relationship with survival and productivity. But just because it's changed and that it will ultimately, hopefully, be good, doesn't mean that it's going to be easy and painless. So I have to completely concede that point. Again, my deep knowledge on this is what gives me a different, more nuanced opinion. But again, perception is reality. As far as most people are concerned, so-and-so has lost their job, whether it's their Uncle Mark or their nephew John. I actually saw it happening in the wild. I was out at breakfast the other week, a couple weeks ago, and there was this young kid, Gen Z kid, who was interviewing for a job at a grocery store because he had lost his job to AI. I don't know what he did. I think it was programming or digital content or digital marketing or something like that. But it's like, it's happening. It's happening to younger people. It's happening to older people. It's happening to all kinds of people are losing their jobs, and they're not having an easy time finding a way back in. So again, that's the perception, and therefore that's the reality. It doesn't matter, on the longer time horizon when people like me say like, yes, we're going to build a new economic paradigm. It's going to take time to build that. So next, number 7, AI hallucinates and makes mistakes. This one is decreasingly true. One thing that I will point out is that many people form an opinion, and then that opinion is very sticky. So pay attention out there when you see people making opinions or expressing opinions about like, well, AI can't do so-and-so. If they formed their opinion when ChatGPT first came out, that opinion is probably no longer valid. With that being said, yes, hallucination is still a problem. Even with GPT-5, which has the best hallucination rate, or a better hallucination rate, particularly with thinking, one of the things that I noticed was I was talking about resonant frequency breathing, which is a way of calming your nervous system down. And in one chat, GPT-5 swore up and down that you should only do it with nasal breathing only, not in through the nose and then out through pursed lips. And I was like, okay, are you sure? Because it's more effective when I do it this other way. I said, no, nasal breathing only. So then I was like, all right, I don't really buy this. So I started a new chat and I said, what? And I pretended not to know. I said, what's the difference between this way and that way? And it said, oh, this other way is actually the way that you're supposed to do it. So essentially, this is the thing that people have noticed, which is that if the AI hallucinates the wrong thing, it'll double down on that wrong thing and insist that, no, you're the wrong one. It's right. And so even GPT-5 thinking and GPT-5 Pro will still do that. So I have to concede the point. It hallucinates and it makes mistakes. I've been in generative AI since GPT-2, so I have a deeper intuition than many people do about how these models think and how they make mistakes. And I know to trust my own judgment and how to double check and those other things. But for most people, their perception is this thing is stupid and it made a stupid mistake and then it doubled down on that stupid mistake. And I am one person who is always raging on Twitter about look at this stupid thing that Gemini did. Look at this stupid thing that Grok did. So yes, I'm right there with them that it's not perfect, but I also have a lot more tolerance for the imperfections and the flaws because I have a lot more understanding of how the technology works and also an understanding that it is improving. But again, perception is reality. And the perception is it hallucinates and makes mistakes, and therefore you can't really trust it. Now, to be fair, I point out all the time that humans hallucinate all the time and make mistakes all the time, and they're very highly confident about those mistakes that I make. That was a Freudian slip. Yes, I make mistakes too. Anyways, moving on. Number 8, AI enables surveillance capitalism. One word answer, Palantir. Palantir. Yes. Palantir just announced that they're building a, universal dossier for every American based on open source intelligence. And guess how they're doing it? Graph theory and generative AI. So yeah, point conceded entirely. That is a thing. Again, whether or not you tolerate that, is it right? Is it okay? Is it ethical or moral? Or is it civically responsible that a private for-profit enterprise is doing this? And they're doing it at the behest of the U.S. government, that seems kind of shady, kind of sketchy. But then again, if you watch conspiracy theory movies for the last umpteen decades, people have assumed that the NSA was listening to every phone call anyways. Now, there's a big difference between fiction and actually being able to point at, there's the company doing it. So this is not even about perception. This is just reality now. And when you say, and particularly how it's worded, AI enables surveillance capitalism. Yes, it does not intrinsically cause it, but it creates a new tool set, and that new tool set is able to be used for those things, whether or not you agree if it's right. And this goes back to a point that I often make, which is that technology is always dual use. Always. The dose makes the poison. So you can have something that is ostensibly really good, and some things that are easier to misuse and some things that are easier to use correctly. Take, for instance, electricity. Electricity can burn houses down. It can electrocute you. It can be very dangerous, but by and large, it's mostly pretty useful. It's a relatively safe technology today because of all the decades of safety research that we've done into making it a safer technology. It also enables surveillance capitalism. By virtue of the fact that without electricity, you couldn't have electronic records and electronic communications and databases and those sorts of things. So then do you say, well, electricity is responsible for all these databases of people that should or should not exist? Or is it just an enablement technology? Again, that's a level of nuance that a lot of people are not going to engage with. The point is, Palantir exists, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company with multi-billion-dollar U.S. government contracts, and it's using generative AI to make dossiers of every American. So whatever the nuance is, that is objectively happening. I can't really argue with that. Next is point number 9, AI destroys the environment. Now this is one where I just categorically reject this, because when you look at how much energy, water, and carbon AI generates compared to literally pretty much every other industry, it pales in comparison. I don't really know how this one started. Yes, there's some alarming depending on your perspective, there's some alarming perspectives that say like, oh, well, AI, could double electricity usage of data centers in the next 3 to 5 years. It could, but data centers don't use that much electricity in the grand scheme of things. Data centers use about 1% to 2% of electricity globally. They use about 4% of electricity in America. And so that really, really pales in comparison to things like aluminum. The aluminum industry uses infinitely more electricity. The trucking industry and the shipping industry uses infinitely more carbon. Almonds use more water than data centers and AI. So, and also these are all solvable problems. There we go. So one thing that you can do is you can do closed loop cooling systems, as the latest data centers are doing, so their water footprint goes down. You can co-locate data centers with energy generation so that they're not even taking energy from the rest of the grid. Now, in those cases, they're burning natural gas, so that is contributing directly to their carbon footprint. But again, all of these are solvable problems. They're building a huge amount of solar to power some of these data centers. So number 9 is another one that I personally just categorically reject. When you look at the information, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But again, if someone sees, data center and power and blah, 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 perception becomes reality. So it just becomes another thing like, if you're pro AI, then you're anti-climate, if you're pro AI, then you're pro climate change or whatever. And it's like, well, no, when you look at the data, that perception doesn't really add up. But again, many people don't engage at that level. So it just becomes, that's their reality. Next, number 10, AI harms low-paid workers. It takes jobs, offshore training. This is a duplicate of number 6, but the point here is that that this is kind of, in my interpretation, virtue signaling about how it harms offshore workers. Now, let me illustrate this if you're not familiar. There are, particularly the last couple months, there's increasing data and reports about how AI is causing remote workers, particularly in places like the Philippines, to lose their jobs in droves. And it's not just call centers, because originally it was call centers with voice-enabled agents. Now it's also programmers and other things. I've had numerous people reply to comments in other places saying that they had an offshore team of programmers, whether it was in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, that it's like actually with AI that communicates with them, and they're using codecs and those things. It communicates them with them on demand in their own language, and they're able to do all the programming, all the coding without the help of offshore people. So then what do? They let 5 to 6 offshore people go. And if that was just one anecdote, that would be one thing, but it's a big enough trend that like a lot of people are feeling it. So if you're concerned about, we had this globalization scheme that allowed us to hire remote workers from Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe or wherever else, then, it harms them because now they're cut off and they're isolated. And this is something that I've actually talked about with business leaders, is that the near-term impact of AI is probably a net negative for developing nations, because it's like, well, they're getting cut off from this supply of, money coming from developed nations. But then they get to leapfrog because then they get that same technology, which will help them with education and medicine and those other things. But then it's like, is that really, is it really worth the loss? And maybe that's the wrong question, because it's like, what agency do they have over that choice? But again, that doesn't make the argument any better, because it's like they don't have any agency over this choice. They just got fired. So again, you can't really argue with that. The facts of the matter are, people from developing nations are losing their jobs in droves, and it's probably only going to accelerate from here. So whether or not you say that that's a good thing or a bad thing, it depends on your personal perspective, but that perception then becomes reality. AI harms workers in developing nations. Next, 11, AI is dangerous for high-risk professions, such as lawyers, doctors, risks misdiagnosis, and that kind of thing. This is... the data doesn't back this up, particularly with medicine, because it shows very consistently that when patients and doctors are armed with ChatGPT, medical outcomes get better. Now, I don't have a specific study to point to this, but the anecdotes are wild. And there's plenty of Facebook communities and Reddit communities of doctors, and they're all trading, insights. Here's how I used it to, address this complex case. I personally, and all the people that I have coached on using ChatGPT to advocate for yourself for complex medical issues, like it really changes medical outcomes. So this to me seems more like someone imagined it, like, oh, well, it makes mistakes. Therefore, because we did concede that it does hallucinate and it does make mistakes. So therefore, if it hallucinates or makes mistakes on a critical choice, then it's going to have, many downstream negative consequences. While that is possible, the data doesn't really support that. The data shows that by and large, outcomes, particularly medical outcomes, increase when you use these things. And of course, then other people have, you've probably seen posts around where people used it to defend themselves from bogus legal fees and other things, and they used it to write court filings. So legal outcomes also improve when you have these AI tools. And I have corporate lawyer friends who use AI extensively, and it catches many of the same things that they find. And they basically don't need to hire paralegals because it's better than most human paralegals at researching and better than most human paralegals at writing briefs. And then they just double check it and correct it. So the data doesn't really show that AI is dangerous for high risk professions. There are certainly things that AI cannot do yet. It can't do underwater welding, but it's only a matter of time. Next, number 12 is AI causes power concentration and platform enshittification. This to me is a downstream of all the incentives that we were talking about earlier, like spam bots and driving down quality. So this to me, item number 12 feels like a downstream consequence of some of those other things that we already talked about. And I will point out a countervailing fact, which is that YouTube has demonetized AI generated content. So some of this is not the platform itself, it's how people use the platform. And there's been huge, backlash, like between DeviantArt and Reddit and YouTube. A lot of these places are debating as to whether or not to just outright ban AI content. So personally, it seems like, yes, if people use AI to generate slop, then that can drive quality down, point conceded. But it's also forcing the conversation, do we actually want human-generated content? And the answer, by and large, seems to be yes, we do want human-generated content. So this could actually increase platform quality over time, but again, perception is reality. Number 13, AI undermines human dignity and ethics. This is such a vague criticism that it's very difficult to nail down. Now, if you say like it undermines human dignity because it takes away things from people like their jobs or their artwork, then yeah, I guess I can concede that point. But the dignity of being human, if your dignity is eroded by the existence of like a technology that is still optional to use, like that just sounds like hyperbole to me. Now, it is forcing many ethical conversations. So if you say like, oh, well, the existence of Palantir is an example of AI undermining, human dignity and human ethics, then it's like, yeah, that's a conversation worth having. But I don't think it's at all remotely settled that that is naturally the consequence. And I certainly don't think that there's consensus that AI does this, because in my personal experience, AI increases ethics and dignity, because it's like, if something happens in my life, whether it's I have a disagreement with a fan, because it happens, or if I have a disagreement with my doctor, or, some boomer gets mad at my wife while she's out at coffee, this literally happened. We have these AI tools to explain the situation and be like, is there anything that I could have done better? Is there something that I did wrong? What are the red flags that I missed? But again, that's how we're choosing to use the tools. You can also use the tools to win arguments with your spouse. There's a huge trend right now of people blaming their divorce or their marital issues on the fact that both partners are using ChatGPT for relationship stuff. And by the way, yeah, I basically stopped doing that. It's like, if you want to unpack something and you want to understand, then that's one thing. But if you want to use it to win an argument, that's probably not the healthiest way to use artificial intelligence. So, again, it's the more you look at it, the more nuanced it is, and it's not necessarily black and white, but to some people, because their perception goes one way, it is black and white. Personally, if your marriage is run off the rails because of a chatbot, then there was probably some fragility already there. I'm just going to leave it there. Number 13 is AI presents an existential risk, 14, AI presents an existential risk. This is something that I think has already been litigated in the court of public opinion. Obviously, there's still some doomers out there, but the doomer movement peaked in 2023. 2 years later, the last hurrah was Eliezer Yudkowsky's book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. And the reviews of that book are scathing. It almost seems like this book has had the opposite effect. It's basically old recycled arguments, caricatures, straw men. It doesn't even explain what superintelligence is. It just launches into diatribes about it. And someone said it's not an argument, it's a rant. But again, this is something that I've studied. That's actually why I started my YouTube videos so many years ago, was to get involved in AI safety and alignment research and to share my work and to share the work of others. If people still believe that it's an existential risk, and by the way, that X risk is always just around the corner, so that's a durable thing. So while objectively speaking, I haven't seen any evidence that AI presents, existential risk, that doesn't mean that that isn't people's perspective. And if their perception is one thing and they're resistant to contravening evidence, then that perception becomes a sticky reality. That's what it is. But the fact that this was only number 14 in the list is like, okay, what I thought people hated AI about was very wrong. And then 15, AI companies are unaccountable. This is something that I think a lot of us agree with. And this is one of the reasons that every time I see people get poached from one company or leave and start their own company, or I see China one-up them, I see that as a structurally good thing. So when Mark Zuckerberg poaches talent from OpenAI and X poaches talent from Google and so on and so forth, and the churn keeps going, and then China mogs them all with cheaper, better AIs, I think that that is a good thing, because we cannot necessarily hold them accountable with just canceling our subscriptions. The product is too compelling. The demand is there. So then the only way to hold them accountable is with a more competitive environment. And the reason that I say that is because a competitive environment means that if you have options, like a lot of people have canceled their Claude subscriptions because Claude is too sanctimonious. Now, Claude is still the winner in terms of corporate adoption, using it on the API for coding purposes, but at the same time, it's not getting the consumer uptake. Why? Because people have other options. People have the choice of Gemini, of ChatGPT, of DeepSeek, of Perplexity. And so the more competition there is, the more choices the market has to say, I find this company to be more ethical. And so the accountability is through market dynamics and market pressure. Now, of course, you might say, well, Dave, that's even worse because now it's a race to the bottom. So again, it's not perfect. And I do have to concede the point that there is nothing that you and I individually or even collectively can do, because guess what? People have tried to sue these companies for harming humanity or harming copyright. And all of those lawsuits generally fail, or they settle quietly out of court. It seems like no matter what Sam Altman does that's good or bad, he's got a sterling reputation, and he seems to be completely Teflon coated. So yeah, they're completely unaccountable, which is civically dubious, I think is how I'll set that. So the whole point of this video was just to go through and just for all of you people out there, because if you're watching me, I think the vast majority of you are because you're techno-optimist or you're pro-technology or pro-AI. Some people watch me that disagree, and that's fine, but that's why we're having this conversation, is because I really wanted to look at all these points, all these categories of complaints, and really just give them proper airtime, because the only way we're going to come to consensus is if we all talk about it. And personally, again, it's no skin off my back, because the technology really does speak for itself, sometimes literally speaks for itself. So I don't need to pretend like, oh no, AI is this perfect sterling thing. Like if we don't have the courage to look hard at our own beliefs and ask other people, because if you want other people to look at their beliefs, but you're not willing to look at your beliefs, like that's just hypocrisy, plain and simple. And so I feel like, what I tried to do with this video is go through one, just objectively, what are the complaints? And I wanted to give them a fair shake. I disagree with some of them, and I editorialized that along the way. That doesn't mean that I'm right. It doesn't mean that I am, the authority. Like, I'm not the lore master and who says, like, I have spoken and this is the way of the land. That's just my take. And feel free to agree or disagree. Maybe there's some points that I missed. I thought that this was pretty comprehensive. Anyways, with that being said, I'm going to stop rambling. I hope you get a lot out of this. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going, because I think that we can always do better as a species. We can always do better as a society. And I do think that AI is such a compelling tool that it's worth having these conversations. It's worth litigating it out, and it's worth working through the issues, even if the consensus we come to is, yeah, this is a difficult problem and it kind of sucks. As long as we can get to those table stakes and then move forward, that is how we navigate to the golden path, right? Because civilization is path dependent. And what that means is that, if you take the wrong left or right turn at some point, then you can end up in a bad situation, and it can be really difficult to get out of that situation. That's not to say that, like, oh, it's inevitably going to go off a cliff, but it does take responsible steering to get to the good ending, right? If you've ever played a long RPG, you want the true ending. That means you have to deliberate as you go. All right, that's enough rambling. Thanks for watching. Cheers.